Now, this is where Texas politics gets interesting. Here again are two guys named Jason, some great guests, and cold Texas beer for another smart conversation on Y'all-itics, the unofficial political podcast of Texas.
Hey, so Wheeler, I'm glad you could join us for this podcast, man. It seems like we always have to wait on you for a minute, man. You finally got back from the nail salon. Let's see your nails.
The funny thing is that you had to wait on me once again to start this one, didn't you?
Always, man. But seriously, show us your nails. Let's see your nails.
You don't want to see them; they're pretty bad. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's unusual for you to lose your train of thought, man. What do you're distracted today in this episode? What's going on?
I am distracted. It's called having too many burners on at the same time and trying to cook way too many things. And what you end up doing is undercooking or burning all of it.
Right. Well, let me get things going here. I think.
Yes, please.
We should have done this. Every so often, there's a podcast that really lends itself to getting on the road and going. This is the podcast I think we made a mistake on.
Yeah.
By doing it.
What were we
Zoom.
thinking?
We should have spent some of the vast beer budget that we have at Y'all-itics for a southbound ticket and gone down to interview this guy in person. I would have loved to have done that. It would have been, I'm sure, steaming hot, but still, when you guys see this, if you're watching this, when you see this character we're interviewing today, I mean, this guy is, when you think of Texas, he is Texas through and through.
And if you're not watching this, maybe consider pausing it in its audio only form and trying out something new and watching the podcast on YouTube, because we do have our own YouTube page there. All you got to do is Google Y'all-itics YouTube. It'll take you right to it, and you can actually see it as you hear it, which a lot of people apparently like. They get into that.
And this guy, when you see this guy that we're about to interview, a guy named Jesse Fuentes, you will see what we're talking about, how Texas this guy is. So I'm sure everyone's seen the news by this point. Last couple of weeks, Governor Abbott has deployed a brand new countermeasure to go after the undocumented immigrants coming across the Rio Grande. He had the gunboats. I think Rick Perry put the gunboats out there on the Rio Grande a few years back. Now there's the razor wire that's all over the place. Governor Abbott has flooded the border area with state troopers. Well, the latest little trick they're putting down there is big, giant orange balls, big buoys, 1,000-foot stretch of them that they're dragging around to these high trafficked areas to try to cut down on people going across the river and getting them back on some of the international bridges, the 29 international bridges that we have. If they're going to declare asylum, might as well declare asylum on the bridge instead of coming across on the river.
Yeah, and this all, of course, is going on in the background. This is one of many controversies down at the border right now, just here in the past several days. Don't know how closely everybody's been watching the news as to what's been happening on the border. Texas, the Governor Abbott in particular has made the border a top priority. The state has been spending billions of dollars down there to try to stop the flow of immigrants coming in, which is, of course, a federal responsibility, but the state is spending its own trove of cash on that. And just in the past couple of days, there have been reports coming out now that are being investigated by the state that a trooper sent an email to a supervisor. And here was the line that really stood out in that email. I believe we have stepped over a line into the inhumane. Some allegations coming from that trooper that, again, are being looked into now by the state of Texas, that, there have been some problems with that razor wire down there, injuring people, badly injuring people who are coming across the river. And then you add in on top of that now these buoys that have been floated out in the middle of the river by the state, at least in that one section. And Beto O'Rourke, of course, who former congressman from here in Texas, also former candidate for Senate on the Democratic side, has come out in the past couple of days saying there is one person who has the power to stop Abbott. He tweeted, "Stop him from deploying razor wire and medieval drowning devices designed to ensnare and mutilate." And then he says, "Mr. President, we need you to act." So this was a message straight to President Biden from Beto O'Rourke on Twitter.
Yeah, and we haven't seen President Biden say anything on this yet. And I guarantee you, Governor Abbott would love nothing more than some type of public political clash with President Biden over this. So it's kind of tricky for both sides to handle that. Here's what people don't get about the Rio Grande and about South Texas, just the Rio Grande in general. If you watch cable news or if you scroll through Twitter, you're probably scared to death and think this is really a militarized area. It is still very much a place that people go and picnic, people go and fish, people go and hang out on the river like you would any river anywhere in this state. People still enjoy the river despite all this stuff. And that's who our guest is today. So when Governor Abbott decided to deploy these latest buoys out there on the river, he put them in a place called Eagle Pass. You may have heard of Eagle Pass. It's kind of just as Texas goes from the tip of Texas down there in the Brownsville areas, it starts to climb up past Laredo. You have cities like Eagle Pass and then Del Rio, then you get into Big Bend. Eagle Pass is a small little area. It's known for cliffs, gigantic cliffs on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. It's a gorgeous area. And that's also an area right now where, Customs and Border Patrol says we're seeing a lot of people come across the river right there. That's why Governor Abbott put the 1,000-foot buoys right there. It's also an area where our next guest, makes his livelihood. Got him Jesse Fuentes. He's the owner of Epi's canoe and kayak team down there. And when these buoys have gone in, along with the concertina wire over on the river coast over there, and all kinds of other measures that the governor's put out, this has really impacted his business. So he's going to court over this. He filed a lawsuit against Governor Abbott. We decided to call him up in Eagle Pass, and here's what he told us. Jesse, thanks for being with us here. Many people really only know the border from what politicians are tweeting about and talking about, or what they see on cable news, and they probably think it's some type of a military state. But I've been down to Eagle Pass before. For people who haven't been there, can you explain what it's like every day, the cliffs down there, kind of what the river is like on a daily basis?
Sure thing. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate you, gentlemen, allowing me to speak. Basically, life in Eagle Pass is culturally inclined. The river connects both Eagle Pass and Mexico. Historically, there's always been a peaceful existence between Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico, and Eagle Pass, Texas. And so peacefully that, sometimes people just walk across the river to visit friends and back and forth. And this has been our tradition, our history for as long as Eagle Pass has been here, since 1849. And me personally, what I enjoy is this is the river that I grew up on, that we went out and fished, that we went out and swam, and we went out and did a lot of cool things. And but what really, on a day-to-day basis, it's hard to, what I see happening, it's hard to understand what we're going through. It's, before this, what I see as a militarization of the park area that I used to access with my canoes and kayaks, it was peaceful. There was a peaceful coexistence between my company and the U.S. government, the Border Patrol. We'd meet out there. We'd have right river etiquette, left, right. I mean, everything was perfect. But then when the state moved in, it just one thing led to another, to another, to another, to another, and to another. And when I saw them bulldoze one of my favorite islands in the middle of the river, I said, "That's enough. That's enough. The river needs to be represented here. What you're doing to our community, to my livelihood, that's enough."
Click subscribe and get Y'all-itics every week. Y'all-itics, the unofficial political podcast of Texas.
Let's say that these go into effect. Let's say they went into effect tomorrow. They're not going to, but let's say that they do. This new law goes into effect. What do you think is the bottom line change for people across this state and for the border? What does this do?
I think it's going to create devastating mass-wide negative impact and fear in our community, people not reporting crimes. We saw that happened after the last SB4 in 2017. People were not reporting crimes to law enforcement.
Because they're afraid if the cops show up, the cops might ask for your own ID.
Exactly. So even domestic violence centers, I have this local sexual violence task force with subject matter experts. We do a lot of work in that area. And they would tell me we have immigrant women who don't want to report to the police about domestic violence cases because they're afraid. And I had town halls back in 2017 with hundreds of parents worried about if I'm driving down the street or going to the park, I have a broken taillight, what happens if I'm now separated from my child? We had attorneys volunteering to help people fill out paperwork, and that's what we're going to be doing again to try to calm the fear. Law enforcement has worked so hard since 2017 to rebuild those relationships. We ask so much of our law enforcement. We ask them to be mental health counselors. We ask them to be liaisons for our homeless community. We ask them to do so much, and now we're asking them to be immigration officials. They really do not have time to enforce.
And this doesn't include training.
This does not include training. It doesn't mandate. And immigration is a very complex. It's a complex area of law that an officer would not be able to easily determine whether a person is a citizen or has legal status. And that's the other problem with the bill. It's not clear, it's very vague, and it's another reason why states shouldn't be interfering in federal immigration law.
So back to what Jason was asking, SB4, this is a 13-page bill. When this is signed into law, providing it's not immediately, not struck down, but put on hold because of a TRO, what will this physically do? Will it allow police in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Tyler to stop somebody for speeding and also ask, are you here legally?
Yes, if they suspect that you are, I don't like to use this word, but it's in the bill, the word alien. If they suspect under the federal law, if you don't have legal status, if you don't have VACA, if you don't have that, they can then arrest you until you prove that you have legal status, which could take months. They will jail you. They cannot release you on probation. And then you have the option of either being deported right away, signing a paper in front of a magistrate to be removed, and that local law enforcement can take you to a port of entry. So that here in Dallas, that would be DFW Airport, or they could take you to the border and take you to a port of entry on the border.
And so when you get stopped, if you were to get stopped by police, you'd give them your insurance and your driver's license and your passport?
If that officer asks, yeah, and you need to prove that if they suspect that you are here, that you illegally entered, not through a port of entry, is what the language of the bill says. Then
you mentioned carrying your passport. Have you done that since 2017?
Yes.
Do you know other lawmakers, other officials who do this?
I don't know, but I have since then, because that was a very, very tough fight, and we knew what was happening. And yeah.
Let's say you didn't have your passport one day and you get pulled over and they ask you for this and they don't believe your answers. Are you saying that you think that there are going to be cases where we will have people who have full citizenship here who will be taken into custody and started through the process just because an officer has a suspicion?
Yes, and we presented that evidence to the committee and the author of examples where several hundred American citizens, even by ICE, have been wrongfully arrested and deported. There are even settlements. And so when we get into like the immunity provisions of this bill is just so extreme that it will capture American citizens as well. And, why should we as Americans be questioned about our citizenship when we have a right to be here as well?
We talked about, the police reaction to this. I want to talk about the lawmaker reaction to this. There was a clip, I can't remember who recorded it. It was a state lawmaker, I believe, from North Texas, of one of your colleagues, Armando Wally, which I mentioned on here, the program a little earlier. And this was on the House floor. Was this the third special session or the fourth?
Third.
This was the third. I want to play this clip real quick because this shows the passion and the humanity around this argument.
Y'all don't understand the shit that y'all do hurts our community. It hurts us personally, bro.
Could you just let us
It
debate
hurts
it?
us.
Just let us debate it.
It hurts us to our fucking core. And y'all don't understand that. Y'all don't live in our fucking skin. Y'all don't, man. And that's what pisses me off. I sit there, I've been a good fucking soldier to him.
That's right.
To my own fucking detriment.
That's right.
To my own detriment. And to cut off debate when all of our members are trying to have a debate, a civil debate. Nobody's gotten crazy. We're just trying to have a debate.
Representative Wally there told us afterwards that he does not regret anything he said on there. What was your reaction to that whole thing? Because his would just happen to be captured, but I'm sure that everyone was kind of feeling the same thing.
Yes, we have his back. I think his reaction showcased we take this personally because it impacts so many of our families, our constituents, millions of people across our great state. And what happened right before that was that Republicans were trying to limit amendments that we could file on this bill and cut off debate, essentially, which we also dealt with again. We dealt with the motion to cut off the debate.
And they were trying to essentially cut you out of the legislative process.
Right. And if we're elected, then stand up here and debate your bill. Like it's Senate Bill 4 in 2017. We were there till the wee hours of the morning debating the bill, trying to mitigate the damage of the bill, get amendments on there, have the debate about it. And the fact that they wanted to cut debate off before we even started was just a slap in the face to the legislative process and to the institution itself.
Talk about how different that is for people who don't really watch what the legislature does.
It's abnormal, extreme deviation from normal legislative process. We normally, whether you like a bill or not, you get up there and you debate it. If there may be amendments to try to change language in a bill, and that's what we were trying to do, address the numerous issues with the bill through amendments and put it up for a vote. And they tried to cut that off before we even began.
Yeah, and that's where you went viral and stepped up to the mic, and I'll let Whiteley translate it, but you basically told them you don't have the cojones to get up here and defend your own bill. Why are we even here if we can't have debate? Is what you told them. You don't have the cojones, Jason. For our non-Spanish speaking.
I don't speak Spanish. What does that translate to, Wheeler?
I think I can say it. You don't have the balls.
Yeah.
You don't have the balls to defend what you're doing, is what you were telling them.
I didn't realize that went viral, but
it did.
Thanks for telling me.
Do you regret that at all?
No, I don't, because we are elected to defend and fight for our community. And if you are elected and you cannot stand up here and defend it, no matter how long it takes, no matter if we're there 10, 12, 14 hours, you do what it takes to elect, to represent your constituents. And the fact that they couldn't do that, they're cutting it off again. And I think I mentioned in there, they're cutting off our feet. They're trying to silence our voices. They didn't have the courage. I will say now, they didn't have the courage to stand up there and fight for what they believed was right or answer our questions that we had.
So now we're waiting to see what happens legally on this, because a number of organizations, ACLU, Department of Justice, as we just discussed with Congressman Castro there too. A number of people are interested in challenging this new Texas law when it is signed into law by the governor. Here's the thing that strikes me. This is all about race. Let's talk about race here, because that's the elephant in the room. What if you're pulled over, Wheeler, by someone who wants to see your identity? What are you going to do to prove your citizenship? What are you going to do?
I would have nothing. I don't carry that with me. I have my license, but that doesn't prove
citizenship.
I don't know. I might have to get you on the phone and vouch for me. I don't know. I wouldn't have. I don't carry my passport around like Representative Niave Criado does, which is extraordinary. Again, a Texas representative feeling the need to carry those papers.
But should you though?
Should I?
Yeah, should you? If when this becomes law.
It's a funny thing. I don't think that many people are mistaking me for being in the country illegally. But I will say, I used to live in Miami, and people there would start speaking very fast Spanish to me, and they thought I was from Venezuela or something like that. So it is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't have papers.
Yeah, I don't know. Just in the conversation with
it's something to think about, though, because it's something I never do think about. And that's why we had the conversation today, because this is going to be a consideration for a lot of people in this state, and not just people who are undocumented. It's
Absolutely.
going to be a thought for a lot of people who have full citizenship and have their whole lives.
Much more to come on this one, but I'm glad we finally tackled this subject.
Well, again, we're pacing here because this is where the battle really begins. It's not the legislature, it's what happens in the high court, in the U.S. Supreme Court. And, this has been decided before, but, that's what people thought too about Roe versus Wade. And many, many years later, this much more conservative court turned all of that around. And there is a thought that we could see that happen with this as well. And that's why this is such a big issue coming out of Texas.
Thanks as always for listening to Y'all-itics. We appreciate it. Whether you're watching us on YouTube, we appreciate that, or listening to us if you downloaded this episode. Thanks as always. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and we have a couple fun episodes at the end of the year we're going to be putting together. Wheeler's not involved in those, fortunately. That's why they're going to be fun.
That's why they're fun.
Exactly.
That's what makes it fun.
I'm just kidding. We'll have Wheeler involved in some form or fashion. But thanks as always for listening. We appreciate it.
Hey, y'all. This is where Texas politics gets interesting. For another smart conversation on Y'all-itics.
Representative, thanks for coming in. We appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
You faced a lot of pushback about this bill, House Bill 4, which you originally came up with earlier this year. State Rep Victoria Niave Criado, Congressman Joaquin Castro, they were both on our Y'all-itics political podcast recently talking about this. You said they were making inaccurate statements. What are they getting wrong on this?
Well, first of all, and I did carry House Bill 4 both in the third special session and very similar to what we passed this time out of the House and the Senate with Senate Bill 4. And so they're very similar, but there's a lot of mischaracterization that this is one of these, similar to what Arizona did back in 2010 with SB 1070 that they passed. It's the subject of the Arizona versus U.S. case, kind of a show me your papers deal. That is not at all what Senate Bill 4 does. It's focused on the misdemeanor criminal offense of if someone, an alien, enters our country illegally, basically at a place other than a port of entry, then they've committed a state criminal offense, a Class B misdemeanor, and there's nothing really new about that. That's in existing federal law, has been on the law on the books for years.
Opponents say they worry about racial profiling, and that's something you've heard a lot about. You say this is not going to result in that because of laws that are already on the books. This is a Class B misdemeanor, and that has a statute of limitations for 2 years. So you say there's no chance that somebody in Houston or the city of Dallas or West Texas is going to get pulled over and picked up if they've been here for 50 years.
Well, I'm not saying that they couldn't be stopped or detained, but let's go back to the racial profiling issue. This bill for illegal entry and the elements of illegal entry have absolutely nothing to do with race. As a matter of fact, we're having people come across our southern border from over 100 different countries. I don't know which race that we're talking about. I mean, it'd be very difficult to say that this is racial profiling. It's not. It's whether someone has met the elements of this offense, which would be a misdemeanor. And as you say, a misdemeanor offense in Texas, all misdemeanors have a 2-year limitation period. So we're not going after someone that's been here longer than 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. We're not going after someone's grandmother that's been here for 50 years. There's no way that a law enforcement officer that would make a stop can prove that or meet the element of that sufficient to arrest someone and charge them with illegal entry.
The way I read the law is that the law enforcement officer, well, let me change that. The way I read this legislation is a law enforcement officer has to physically see them come across illegally, not at a port of entry?
Well, not necessarily. I do think that most of the time there will be what we call on-view observations of people breaking the law. So I think most of what occurs, most of the enforcement, what I've said is 95% of it would be within 50 miles of the border. So many of the cases will be observations, people seeing them cross. But we also have other means. We have technology, we have surveillance, video surveillance, we have other means that they're utilizing right now, law enforcement utilizing in Operation Lone Star, that we can rely on too. We want to make sure that we're apprehending and prosecuting the people that are violating the offense of illegal entry and not someone else that may have been here for some period of time, or someone within which the law enforcement or any prosecutor couldn't prove that case.
Will police in Dallas and Amarillo and Houston and San Antonio and Austin, will they be able to enforce this if they don't see somebody coming across, if they don't have any evidence that I crossed without going through a port of entry?
Well, if they don't have any evidence, it's going to be hard to prosecute somebody. But it's a statewide law, so it's not just enforced just on the border. It could be enforced in Texarkana. But the likelihood, my view is the farther you get away from the scene of the crime or the situs, the more difficult it would be for a law enforcement officer to allege and prove that someone has crossed illegally and that they did it when they did it and that they did it within 2 years. I mean, you just don't have that information.
Why not just write it where, you know, it's only for 50 miles along the Rio Grande for that area, just narrow it down?
And that's a fair question, but I do think there could be circumstances where law enforcement officers would know, just like we have now. I represent 12 rural counties. We have arrests constantly where people are with smuggling and other things. We have people in our county jails right now that would qualify under this offense. And so we don't want to necessarily limit it. We don't want to tie law enforcement's hands. And so that's why it's a statewide law. But I do think there would be much less apprehension, arrest, detention, prosecution in these urban counties and places away from the border.
But how would you know, like for Jack County specifically, how would you know somebody in the county jail might be able to be prosecuted under this?
You probably wouldn't. You probably wouldn't unless the officer would otherwise, you know, they're trained to look into something and investigate and come up with that determination. So.
But wouldn't they have to ask, are you here legally? Do you have a passport, stuff like that? Wouldn't they have to ask for your papers?
Not really. I don't think they do. And not only that, but if they do that and they haven't read them their rights, then that's what we call custodial interrogation. That runs afoul of that evidence even being admissible at a trial. So there's some safeguards, and there are more safeguards in Senate Bill 4 that we did as far as due process, taking someone to, not just relying on law enforcement, but taking someone to an independent magistrate and letting them make that determination, and we go from there. And if someone doesn't agree with that, if someone is charged with that offense and they think, hey, wait a minute, I don't meet one of those criteria, or you can't prove that I did it, because the burden of proof is not on the defendant, it's on the state. And if they feel that they can't prove that, then certainly they're entitled to their day in court, just like any citizen or non-citizen would have.
You represent how many counties?
12.
And these are hundreds of miles away from the border. Some people watching this might say, why in the world are you making this a priority?
Well, I would say if you spend any time in my district, you would know that border security is a #1 issue. Because of Biden's continued failure and refusal to enforce our secure our borders and enforce immigration law, every county in Texas has become a border county. Every county in Texas is affected, whether it be with law enforcement, whether it be with health care, whether it be with education, whether it be with just general operation of government. We're all affected, and I would argue that my rural counties are more adversely affected than larger counties, because we just don't have the budget to accommodate all this, especially in the interest of health care. I mean, I represent a hospital district. We treat whoever walks in the door for whatever they need. You know, those folks, if they come here illegally, they're not on Medicare, they're not on Medicaid, they don't have private insurance, they don't have any money. We absorb those costs.
How many undocumented show up at these hospitals, do you know, in your district?
It's hard to tell. I don't know that we keep that record and that number, but quite a few. In the previous situation, I knew one hospital that was in my district, and they ran into one person. It ended up costing them, because over $100,000, that they ate that cost, they absorbed that cost. That's a lot of money to a rural hospital.
Okay, y'all, the conversation doesn't stop here. Find us on Twitter and Instagram. We're at Y'all-itics.